I'll never forget that dinner. It was supposed to be a simple Friday evening. My wife, Claire, had invited her closest friends over. She called it a catch-up dinner, nothing fancy, just food, wine, laughter, and stories around our dining table. I didn't think much of it. Claire had always been social, and I'd grown used to her little gatherings. But that night, something was different. From the moment her so-called best friend Ethan walked through the door, I could feel the air shift. He carried himself with the kind of swagger only a man who thinks too highly of himself can. Slim-fit blazer, smug grin, and a bottle of overpriced wine clutched in his hand like it was a trophy. "Ah, there's the lucky man," he said, clapping me on the back as if we were old pals. "Claire's husband, the legend himself. You must have some secret trick, because honestly," he let his words dangle, flashing that sly smirk as his eyes darted toward Claire. I forced a polite smile. "Nice to see you too, Ethan." That should have been the end of it. A harmless jab, maybe even bad humor. But no, the man couldn't help himself. Through appetizers, he kept tossing little remarks my way. "Claire, you've really outdone yourself with this meal. You sure he helped at all, or does he just eat what you cook?" When Claire mentioned my business, Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes sparkling with mock amusement. "Impressive. I mean, it's not exactly Fortune 500, but hey, it pays the bills, right?" Everyone laughed nervously, even Claire, though her laugh sounded forced, brittle. I tried to brush it off, but with every word he spoke, I could feel the heat building in my chest. And then it happened. The moment that turned an ordinary dinner into the night everything cracked. We were clearing plates, and Ethan, clearly enjoying himself far too much, leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. His voice carried across the table, deliberate and loud. "You know, Claire," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "You could do way better than him as a husband." Silence. The clinking of forks stopped. The laughter died. Every head at that table turned toward me. Claire's smile faltered, her face draining of color. She looked at Ethan as if willing him to shut his mouth, but he didn't. He doubled down. "I mean, come on. You're beautiful, smart, accomplished. And him?" He waved a dismissive hand in my direction. Well, he's just him." The room spun. My pulse slowed, steady, cold. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fists. Instead, I looked him dead in the eye, leaned forward slightly, and said, calm and clear, "Careful, Ethan. That's the last time you'll disrespect me in my own home." The smirk slipped from his face, just for a second. The others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. But then Claire, my wife, turned to me with fire in her eyes. "Apologize to him right now," she snapped, "or we're done." I stared at her, stunned. The man who mocked her husband, who humiliated me in front of everyone, suddenly deserved an apology? I didn't say a word. I didn't even blink. I just sat back, folded my arms, and let silence speak for me. The table fell into chaos. Nervous laughter, muttered excuses, chairs scraping back as guests found reasons to leave early. Claire stormed into the kitchen, slamming cabinets, muttering about how I'd embarrassed her. But I wasn't embarrassed. Not anymore. I just smiled. Because in that moment, I knew something she didn't. This wasn't the end of a dinner. It was the beginning of the end of us. And what she didn't realize was that I was already preparing to show her exactly what "we're done" really meant. The house was quiet the morning after the dinner. Too quiet. Claire barely spoke a word to me as she got dressed for work. No kiss goodbye, no smile, not even a glance. She just grabbed her bag and walked out the door like I wasn't even there. I sat at the table sipping cold coffee, staring at the empty chair across from me. The night before kept replaying in my head. Ethan's smug face, Claire's furious eyes, and that ultimatum that hung in the air like poison. Apologize to him right now, or we're done. I didn't apologize. I never would. And the silence that followed told me she knew it. That evening, she came home later than usual. I was reading in the living room when she walked in. She didn't sit. She didn't take her coat off. She just stood there, staring at me with arms crossed. "I need some space," she said finally. "Space?" I repeated, my voice low. "Yes. Time to think. About us. About everything." I tilted my head. "And where exactly are you planning to find this thinking space?" Her eyes darted away for just a moment before landing back on me. "At Ethan's. He's a friend, and he understands me." The words hit me like a hammer, but I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, I saw what I hadn't wanted to see before. The loyalty was gone. Whatever bond had once held her to me had already snapped. If that's what you want, I said calmly, then go. Her jaw tightened, clearly expecting me to fight, to plead, to chase. When I didn't, she grabbed her overnight bag, already packed, I realized, and left. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house like a gunshot. For weeks, Claire stayed at Ethan's place, telling anyone who asked that she was sorting things out. She fed our friends the line about needing clarity, about me being controlling and unwilling to compromise. I stayed silent. Let her paint whatever picture she wanted. What she didn't know was that while she was out thinking, I was planning. I met with a lawyer. I changed the locks on certain accounts. I redirected mail, updated documents, and quietly began separating the life we had built. Every night, I sat at that same kitchen table, going through files, setting things in motion. The neighbors noticed Claire's car missing for weeks. Some whispered. Some asked polite questions. I simply smiled and said she was staying with a friend. It wasn't a lie. But while she thought she was punishing me, living at Ethan's, flaunting her independence, she was actually giving me the one thing I needed most: time. Time to prepare. Time to strip away illusions. Time to decide exactly how this would end. And every time the phone buzzed with one of her half-hearted texts, I need more time. I'm not ready to talk yet. I just smiled. Because when she finally came back, expecting me to still be waiting, she was going to find out what "we're done" really looked like. And she wouldn't like it. Not one bit. It was almost 3 weeks to the day when Claire finally came back. I heard the car before I saw it. The crunch of tires on our gravel driveway. The sharp slam of a car door. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, a folder of papers in front of me, coffee in hand. The lock clicked, the door opened, and there she was. Claire stood in the doorway like a weary traveler, coat draped over her arm, suitcase behind her. But it wasn't exhaustion on her face, it was entitlement. The look of someone who thought she could disappear for weeks and return like nothing had happened. "I'm home," she said, as if those words carried authority. I looked up from my coffee. "Are you?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. I needed time. To think. I nodded slowly. "And what conclusion did you come to in all that thinking?" She hesitated. Her eyes shifted, calculating. "That you overreacted. That you embarrassed me in front of my friends. Ethan was joking, and you made it ugly." I let out a low laugh, cold and humorless. "A joke, huh? So when he said my wife could do better than me, I should have just smiled and poured him another glass." "Yes," she snapped, slamming her coat onto the chair. "That's what grown men do. They let it go." "And wives?" I asked evenly. "Do wives let it go when their husbands are mocked to their face?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't twist this. You disrespected him, and by extension, you disrespected me." I leaned back, folding my arms. "I didn't disrespect him. I shut him down. Big difference." Claire's voice rose. "You should apologize. He's my best friend. He's been there for me more than you ever have lately." The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. I just let the silence stretch until she grew restless. She hated when I stayed calm. Finally, I spoke. "You've made your choice, Claire. You spent 3 weeks living at his place. You defended him instead of me. You demanded I apologize for protecting myself. And now you waltz back in here expecting what? Forgiveness? A reset button?" Her face flushed. "I came back because I want to fix this. But if you keep holding on to this pride, there won't be a marriage left to fix." I smiled faintly, and for the first time in weeks, I felt no anger, only clarity. "There already isn't." She blinked, stunned. "What?" I slid the folder across the table toward her. Inside were copies of bank statements, property titles, and the preliminary divorce paperwork my lawyer had drafted. Her hands shook as she opened it, eyes darting across the words that spelled out a future she hadn't expected. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is what we're done looks like." Her voice cracked. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I replied, my tone steady. "You walked out the door the night you sided with him over me. That was the end. This is just the paperwork to make it official." The color drained from her face. She gripped the chair to steady herself, then whispered, "So that's it? You're just throwing everything away?" I shook my head. "No, you did. I'm just finishing what you started." The room went silent except for the tick of the wall clock. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not the husband who endured, not the man she could push around, but someone who was done playing her games. And the panic in her eyes told me she finally understood that this time, she had no control. Claire stood frozen, gripping the back of the chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For weeks, she had imagined she held the power, that by retreating to Ethan's place, she was punishing me, making me sweat, leaving me desperate for her return. But when she opened that folder and saw her name on divorce papers, reality hit her like a brick wall. Her first reaction wasn't anger. It was fear. Wait, she stammered, her voice shaky. You don't mean this. We've been married for 15 years. You can't just throw that away. I sipped my coffee, calm as stone. I didn't throw it away, Claire. You did, the moment you packed your bag and left for his place. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic, of someone watching control slip through her fingers. I just needed space. I needed someone who would listen without making everything a fight. And conveniently, I said, that someone was a man who thinks you can do better than your husband. Her mouth opened, then closed. She couldn't deny it. Do you know what it felt like? I continued, my voice still steady. To sit in my own dining room, with guests at my table, and hear your best friend mock me as though I were nothing? And instead of standing with me, you turned your fire on me. Not him. Me. Her tears broke then. She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. I was angry. I was embarrassed. I didn't mean it like that. Please, we can fix this. I pulled my arm away. No, this isn't about fixing anything. This is about facing the truth. She sank into the chair, clutching the folder. If you do this, if you go through with this, it'll destroy me. You know that, right? I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. No, Claire. You destroyed yourself. You chose him over me. You chose to leave this house. You chose to gamble your marriage on a man who mocks husbands at dinner tables. Actions have consequences. You taught me that when you said, apologize or we're done. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean it. I cut her off. But I did. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air. She tried a new tactic, softening her voice, playing the role of the victim. Ethan, he's just a friend. That's all. It's not what you think. I chuckled darkly. Then why did you run to his place the moment I refused to kneel? Why was his couch your thinking space instead of your sister's, or your parents', or any other person in your life? Her silence was the answer. I stood, gathering the folder back into my hands. You see, Claire, you wanted me to beg, to apologize, to crawl. But instead, you gave me time. And while you were gone, I prepared for life without you. Her tears turned to frustration, desperation bleeding into her voice. You'll regret this. You think you're strong now, but when the nights get long and you're alone, you'll wish you'd fought harder for us. I walked to the door, opened it, and glanced back at her. The only thing I regret is wasting so many years on a woman who sided with her so-called friend instead of her husband. That mistake ends now. The slam of the folder against the table was the last sound she made before I left her there, sobbing into her hands. But deep down, I knew she wasn't mourning our marriage. She was mourning her loss of control. And what she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Claire barely spoke to me unless it was necessary, drifting around the house like a shadow. But behind that silence, I could sense the storm brewing. She wasn't giving up, she was regrouping. On the fourth evening, I got confirmation. My phone buzzed with a message from an old friend who'd been at that disastrous dinner. Saw Claire with Ethan today. Coffee shop downtown. She looked upset. He was consoling her. Thought you should know. I just smirked. Of course she'd run to him again. That's what people like Claire do when they feel cornered. They scramble for allies. Later that night, she finally tried to confront me. She came into the living room, arms folded, chin raised, the posture of someone trying to look strong while shaking on the inside. I talked to Ethan today, she announced. I didn't even look up from the newspaper. Of course you did. She bristled. He agrees you're being unreasonable, that you're overreacting. He said any other man would have apologized and moved on. I folded the paper neatly, set it aside, and looked at her. Let me guess. He also said you deserve better? Her eyes flickered, just for a second, and that was all I needed. Claire, I said evenly, you've made him your confidant, your defender, your savior. But tell me this. When he mocked me at dinner, do you think he was just attacking me? No. He was mocking your choice in a husband. He was mocking you. She flinched, but quickly hardened her expression. You twist everything. Ethan respects me. He actually listens. Unlike you. I leaned forward, my voice dropping lower. He doesn't respect you, Claire. He pities you. Big difference. He gets to play the hero while your marriage crumbles, and you let him. Her cheeks flushed with anger. You're so arrogant. You think you're winning by drafting those papers, by threatening me. But you'll see, Ethan's right. You can't do this alone. I stood slowly, towering over her. You're half right. I can't do this alone. Which is why I've already brought in people who actually matter. My lawyer. My accountant. My family. While you were running to Ethan for sympathy, I was building my exit on solid ground. Her confidence faltered then. She hadn't expected me to be so far ahead of her. You're really going through with this? She whispered. Yes. I met her gaze, unblinking. And the more you run to him, the easier you make it for me to prove exactly where your loyalty lies. She tried to fire back, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she turned and stormed upstairs, the sound of her footsteps pounding like a drumbeat of frustration. I sat back down, calm settling over me like armor. She thought Ethan's words carried weight. She thought aligning with him would rattle me. But all it did was expose how far gone she already was. And the truth was, I wasn't worried about Ethan at all. He wasn't my rival. He was my proof. Proof that Claire had already chosen her side. And soon enough, everyone else would see it too. It didn't take long for Claire to make her next move. People like her can't stand the idea of losing face. And if she couldn't regain control inside our home, she'd try to do it in public. The invitation came in the form of a text on a Saturday morning. Dinner at Bella Roma tonight. Let's talk this out like adults. Ethan will be there too. Please don't make a scene. I laughed when I read it. Bella Roma, her favorite Italian place, the one with soft lighting, crowded tables, and just enough regulars to make sure word of anything dramatic would spread like wildfire. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about optics. She wanted witnesses. I didn't reply. I just showed up. The restaurant buzzed with the usual weekend energy, couples tucked into booths, glasses clinking. And there they were, Claire and Ethan at a corner table, 2 glasses of wine already half empty. She looked up at me like a queen welcoming a subject into her court. You came, she said, relief and challenge mixing in her voice. I sat, my expression unreadable. You asked me to. Ethan leaned back smugly, adjusting his cufflinks. We were hoping we could clear the air. For Claire's sake. I let my eyes linger on him just long enough for him to shift uncomfortably, then turned back to her. So this is what we're doing now? Negotiations with your best friend as mediator? Claire bristled. Don't be sarcastic. I just want peace. If you would apologize for what happened that night, we could move forward. I smiled faintly. There it is again. That word. Apologize. Ethan smirked. It would be the mature thing to do. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough that the surrounding tables still leaned in. Tell me, Ethan, do you apologize when you humiliate other men at dinner tables? Or just when you finally get called out? His grin faltered. Claire slammed her glass down. Stop it. You're making this worse. I tilted my head at her. Am I? Or am I just showing everyone here exactly what kind of friendship this really is? The tension at the table snapped like a rope. Ethan sputtered something about respect, but I didn't give him the chance. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thin manila envelope, sliding it across the table toward Claire. What's this? She asked cautiously. Reality, I said simply. She opened it and froze. Inside were copies of the retainer agreement with my divorce attorney, bank transfers proving I'd already secured my assets, and a notarized notice of intent to separate. Every line, every stamp, every signature spelled one thing, finality. Claire's face drained of color. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, reading, and for once, the smugness was gone. You're really doing this, she whispered. I nodded. I already have. She slammed the envelope shut, her voice shaking. Do you know how this looks? Do you know what people will think? I stood calmly, sliding my chair back. Yes, they'll think I finally stopped being the man you could mock, humiliate, and control. They'll think I found my dignity again. And then I turned, leaving them both staring in stunned silence while whispers rippled through the restaurant. Outside in the cool night air, I finally breathed freely. Claire wanted a public scene? She got one. But instead of humiliating me, she exposed herself and Ethan for what they really were. And this time, everyone saw it. After that night at Bella Roma, the whispers spread faster than wildfire. I didn't need to say a word. The scene spoke for itself. A wife defending her best friend, while her husband calmly laid divorce papers on the table. It was all anyone could talk about in our circle. By Monday morning, the fallout had begun. Mutual friends called me quietly, checking in, their voices hushed with curiosity. A few confessed Claire had already been spinning her version of the story. He's overreacting. He's paranoid. Ethan is just a friend, and my husband is trying to control me. But the truth had a funny way of leaking out. People had seen her and Ethan together, not just once, not just casually. Coffee shops, late-night drives, her car parked outside his townhouse for weeks while she was supposedly thinking. Even the best liar can't patch that many holes. By Tuesday, Claire started her campaign directly with me. She came into the kitchen while I was pouring coffee, her voice soft, eyes red like she hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" she asked. I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Go ahead." She sat, twisting her hands together. "I made a mistake. I should never have let Ethan come between us. I shouldn't have left like that. I felt cornered. And he was there." I raised an eyebrow. "So he was your safety net?" She nodded quickly, latching onto the phrasing like it helped her case. "Yes, exactly. But it wasn't what you think. I didn't sleep with him. I swear to you. I just needed someone to listen." I sipped my coffee, unbothered. "Claire, it doesn't matter whether you slept with him or not. You chose him. You defended him. You sided with him against me in my own house. That was betrayal enough." Her voice cracked. "But I came back. Doesn't that count for something?" I leaned forward, calm but sharp. "You came back because you realized Ethan isn't the man you thought he was. You came back because you lost control, not because you wanted to save us." Her lip trembled. "Please, don't do this. We have years together. We built a life. You can't just erase it." I set my cup down, meeting her eyes without flinching. "I'm not erasing it. I'm ending it. Big difference." That's when she changed tactics. The tears stopped. The softness evaporated. Her shoulders straightened, her jaw set. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it," she hissed. "I'll take half. I'll make sure everyone knows you drove me into Ethan's arms. You'll be the villain." I smiled faintly, almost pitying her. "You've already tried that. And it failed. People aren't blind, Claire. They saw where you spent your nights. They saw who you defended. And I've been preparing for this longer than you think. You'll walk away with less than you imagine, because I planned for exactly this moment." Her eyes widened as the realization sank in. She had no leverage left. She slammed her fist on the table and stormed out, but I didn't chase her. I didn't need to, because the truth was already circling her like vultures. Friends whispering, family questioning, her best friend suddenly looking less like a confidant and more like the wedge that ended her marriage. And Claire knew it. The woman who once demanded I apologize now stood on the edge of losing everything. Her marriage, her image, her carefully curated life. And I wasn't finished showing her what "we're done" really meant. The morning of our court date, I woke before dawn. Not out of nerves, those had burned away weeks ago, but out of clarity. I brewed coffee, put on my suit, and drove to the courthouse with the calm of a man who had already won. Claire, on the other hand, walked in flustered, clutching Ethan's arm like a lifeline. The sight almost made me laugh. She had dragged him here, her supposed best friend, parading him in front of everyone as if he were proof that she wasn't alone. But all he looked was uncomfortable, tugging at his tie, eyes darting to the ground whenever someone stared too long. My attorney slid a thick folder across the table to the judge. "Your Honor, these documents establish my client's financial independence, the transfer of assets prior to separation, and the evidence that Mrs. Grant chose to reside with a male companion during the period of marital breakdown." The words "male companion" made Ethan shift in his chair. Claire's face went pale. The judge skimmed the papers, then looked over her glasses at Claire. "Is it true you left the marital home to live with this man?" Claire's voice cracked. I just needed space." "It wasn't like that." But Ethan, panicked, interrupted. "We're just friends, Your Honor. She stayed with me because she felt unsafe with him." "That was his mistake." My lawyer leaned forward. "Unsafe? Interesting. Because we have witness statements, dated text messages, and photographs showing otherwise. Dinner dates, overnight stays, public affection. She slid another packet forward. Shall I read them aloud? The judge frowned. Ethan swallowed hard. Claire shot him a look that could have cut glass. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The damage was done. By the end of the hearing, the ruling was clear. I retained the house, the savings accounts, and my business untouched. Claire would leave with little more than her personal belongings and a modest settlement. When the gavel struck, I stood, shook my lawyer's hand, and walked out. Claire followed, her heels clicking frantically across the marble floor. You can't do this to me, she hissed. You ruined me. I turned, calm as ever. No, Claire, you ruined yourself. I just stopped covering for you. Her eyes blazed, desperate for one last strike. Ethan and I. But I cut her off with a smile. Ethan, look at him. She spun. Ethan wasn't beside her anymore. He had slipped out the side door, face red, eager to vanish before the whispers turned into headlines. The man she'd defended so fiercely, the man she'd chosen over me, had abandoned her the moment things got hard. She stood there, stunned, her voice breaking. So that's it. I nodded slowly. That's what we're done really looks like. No more arguments. No more scenes. Just consequences. Then I walked out into the sunlight, leaving her standing in the cold echo of the courthouse hallway. For years, she had believed she could control the story, that her beauty, her charm, her excuses would shield her from consequences. But now everyone knew. Friends, family, colleagues, they all saw the truth. And I didn't need revenge beyond that. Watching her realize Ethan wasn't her savior, watching her leave the courthouse with nothing but a hollow victory speech that no one believed, that was enough. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, the same place where this war had started, I finally felt peace. The house was quiet, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was free. I raised my glass, alone but not lonely, and whispered to the silence. To dignity, to truth, and to never apologizing for being the man I am. Because in the end, she had been right about one thing. She could do better than me as a husband. The problem was, she never did.